Hi, everyone.
Welcome. We are now live. Welcome to Laws of Idolatry or Avoiding Pagan Practices, Chapter 5. We have continuing along the theme of yesterday, where we spoke about a city that becomes an idolatrous city. Today we will speak about one individual who convinces one or more people to go in the ways of idolatry. Just to do what I have been doing over the last few weeks to give you a moment to get the general context. We are in the first of the 14 books of the Rambam, which is the book of knowledge. And we are in the fourth subject, which is the subject of Avodas Kechavim. We started with the foundations of belief in gods. We continued with Deus, which had a lot to do with character development and the mitzvah to love everybody. Then we spoke about Torah study. We're now going into what pagan practices should be avoided, and the final and fifth section, which we will be looking at the end of this week or next week, which will be a fascinating discussion on Teshuvah. And once we conclude that, we will be completing, please God, the very first of the 14 volumes of the Rambam called the Book of Knowledge. We will have the basic knowledge that the Rambam believes every Jew should have. And now let's take a look at these particular halachas. Okay. So you could look along on point form on the left or follow along inside the text on the right. Okay. Hamesis echad Yisrael, somebody who proselytizes a Jew. Bein ish, bein isha, whether a man or woman. Harez niskal is deserving and receives the death penalty, specifically of stoning. So if a person tells another person to serve an idol, even if the person didn't actually serve that idol, so it looks like nothing happened. Okay, it was close call. The person almost violated a serious biblical violation, but nothing actually happened. So the truth is something did already happen. What happened? The very convincing that the convincer does to the person that was convinced, that itself is a violation. Meaning the Torah doesn't only prohibit one from worshiping idols, but the Torah prohibits one from convincing somebody to worship idols, even if neither of the two parties has actually gone ahead and worshipped that idol. Bein shahaya basis hedyoit, bein shahaya navi, shahaya musas yachid ish, isha yichidim isasi miskila. This applies regardless of whether the person instructing was a prophet or an ordinary person, or the person being convinced was one person, a man or woman, or whether this was a number of people. So this is the mitzvah against convincing a few individuals, one person or a few individuals, to serve an idol, and this is called a masis, as you see on the left. Then we have another prohibition, which is a prohibition of a madiach. It's almost the same, but a little different. Let's see. Hamesis is roiv anshe ha'ir, hareze madiach. However, if a person proselytizes the majority of the city, the inhabitants of the city, then he would violate a different prohibition. He wouldn't be violating the prohibition of being a masis, but rather madiach. Meaning a masis is to one or a few people, and madiach is when one convinces the majority of a city. Now you might wonder, if he's convinced the majority of the city, then that might take us a chapter back to chapter 5, where we spoke about an idolatrous city. So the Rambam immediately says that no, this is different. But before that, he says, if the person who leads the majority of a city astray is a prophet, he is executed by stoning, and the people who were led astray are judged as individuals and not considered to be the inhabitants of an ir hadidachas, of an idolatrous city. because we said yesterday that part of the laws of establishing an idolatrous city is where you have at least two that are convincing them to serve the idol. But since here there was only one person that was convincing them to serve the idol, so he is judged not as violating the sin of causing a idolatrous city, and they are not judged as such, but rather as individuals, even if it's a number of individuals that were convinced into serving an idol. Okay, now how does it work? So a Mesa should be stoned to death whether he proselytizes in plural terms or in a singular meaning. So this is how it could play itself out. If he tells a colleague, I will worship a false deity, follow me, join me, I will go and worship, or let us go and worship, following the particular rite for which that deity is served, whether it be slaughtering for a false god, I will slaughter, follow me, I will go and slaughter, or let us go and slaughter. I will bring a burnt offering. Follow me. I will go and bring a burnt offering, or let us go and bring a burnt offering. Or I will offer a libation. Do you know what a libation is? Libation is when they would pour wine on the idol, which parenthetically is why there's a concept called yayin mavushal. I don't know if you've ever seen on a kosher bottle of wine, it says on the bottom mavushal. Mavushal means cooked. Now, why would you write cooked on a bottle of wine? So it was very common for people to utilize any wine that they had as a libation to serve it to a false god, which is a serious prohibition. And therefore, the rabbi said that any wine which hasn't been kept in the hands of a Jew that we are sure is not serving false idols should not be drinking. However, once the wine is cooked, then it would no longer be used for idolatrous purposes. So even today, if you buy a bottle and it says that it's mavushal, which means it's been cooked, then there would be no problem under whose hands it's under, because even if it was in an idolater's hands, he wouldn't use it for his idol since it's cooked, and that wouldn't qualify. They only use uncooked wine. Once it's cooked, it's not of the same quality. That was just parenthetically speaking. Once we spoke about libations. So these are all examples of what the convincer would say. I will go and offer a libation, or let us go and offer a libation, or I will bow down. Follow me. I will go and bow down, or let us go and bow down. So whether he said it in the plural, this is what I'm doing, or he said, let us do it together. When a person proselytizes two individuals, they may serve as witnesses against him. They should summon him to court, testify against him, relating what he told them, and the masis is stoned. Now, just to clarify, the Torah, it's generally not a simple process for somebody to receive the death penalty. I'm sure many of you are familiar with what the Gemara says, that if a Beis Din killed one person in 7 years, that would be considered a bloody Beis Din. And there's a second opinion there, that even if they only killed someone once in 70 years out of the whole world, they would already be considered murderous Beis Din. So although we're just taking from the verse that he is brought to court, he's tried, and he's put to death, this is not a common phenomenon. However, even here, there has to be two witnesses. I don't know how it works in civil law, but from a Torah perspective, nobody can ever be punished unless he be given a death penalty, unless he has two witnesses. So even this particular sin, which is treated more harshly, as we'll see soon, than any other sin in the entire Torah, there still needs to be two individuals. So if he was convincing two people to serve an idol, then they would be able to bring him to court and serve as witnesses that he has violated this command, and he would be put to death. And here's an interesting halacha. Ve'ein hamesis tzarich hasra'a. A mesis does not need to be warned. This is an exception. When it comes to any other mitzvah in the Torah, a person has to be warned of the consequences of his action before he does it. And if he's not, he will not be given punishment. So if a person goes ahead and he does, even if somebody kills somebody, they would not be given the death penalty, according to Torah law, unless they had strict warning beforehand, be aware that what you're about to do is forbidden, and if you do it, you yourself will be put to death. It is only in that context that the Torah will ever allow even a murderer to be put to death. By the way, we're not speaking about removing the danger from society. We're rather speaking about a death penalty. And from the Torah perspective, when a person received the death penalty, it was because that person's soul needed that punishment at that point in order to be cleansed of the sin. And a death penalty would never be issued without warning. There is only one exception, and that is this. The death penalty is given to a basis of whom we are speaking now, even if he wasn't warned. It is such a severe sin that once there are witnesses, even if he was not warned, he would receive a death penalty. This is an exception to the rule. Okay, so how would you go about that? So if a person proselytizes a single individual, so he's only one, we need at least two people. So this person that he proselytizes against should tell him, I have friends that are also interested in this. And he should lure him into proselytizing before two people so that there are witnesses, that there are two people that can testify against him. If the Mason refuses to proselytize before two people, he's smart. He realizes that he doesn't want evidence. He doesn't want to have witnesses. So he's telling people one at a time. Because remember, even the Mason cannot be given his punishment unless there are two people. So he's going to one person at a time. So then the person should say, so you should actually try to trap him. This is called ensnarement. In civil law, it's very common. In America, you have what's called stinging. I don't know if you've ever heard of a sting operation where they have somebody that's involved in a particular crime, and in order to convict him, they will trap him. They'll hide witnesses so that he can have testimony given against him. Under Torah law, we never do ensnarement. We don't trick a person into having witnesses, because as we've said, he has to be warned. And if he's being warned, then he's being warned by those witnesses. Again, this is the only exception. A masis, we actually try to trap him into having witnesses so that this very serious crime or criminal in this regard can be convicted. So that's what the Rambam continues to say. A trap is never set for a person who violates any of the Torah's other prohibitions. This is the only exception. So how would the trap work? The musus, the person that's being convinced, would bring two people and place them in a dark place where they can see the basis, the convincer, and hear what he is saying without him seeing them. And he would tell the person that was being convinced would tell the convincer, can you tell me again what you told me the other day? That sounded like a nice idea. Like, tell me more about it. I'd like to learn more about this idolatrous idea that you had. And the musus should, when he does so, when he tells him, look, I have this amazing idea. We're going to serve this idol. So the musus should say to him, really? How can we forsake our God in heaven and serve wood and stone? If the mason retracts and remains silent, then he wouldn't be held liable, even though he had previously tried convincing him, and had there been two witnesses, he would have been put to death. Since right now, where there are two witnesses, he backs off, he would not be punished. If he tells him, this is our obligation, we must, it is just the thing we got to do, this is beneficial to us, it is just going to be so lovely to serve this idol, then those two people that were hidden in the distance would come out, summon him to the court, and act as witnesses to have him stoned. So when I was reading this, I was wondering, we said at the beginning of this halacha, at the beginning of halacha 3, that he doesn't need to be warned. So if the masis doesn't need to be warned, then why are we advising the musus, the person being convinced, to say to him, how can we forsake our God in heaven and serve wood and stone? And I looked at the commentaries, and the answer is that although the person that's performing the crime doesn't need to be warned of the punishment, he should be warned of the seriousness of the matter. And that's why, in other words, he should realize how serious this sin is. He doesn't need to be warned of the consequences, but he should be brought to his attention how serious this crime is, and hopefully then he'll back off. Okay. Here comes another mitzvah. It is a mitzvah for the musus, the person that was convinced himself, to be the one to execute punishment, to kill, as the Chumash says actually in last week's parsha, I believe, your hand must be the first against him to kill him. Now here's an interesting one. It is forbidden for the Musas to love the basis. I mean, the question is asked in the Tanya, how can a person be convinced to love or convinced to hate? It's a feeling in the heart. You can't tell somebody love this person or don't love this person. But really, the Torah does teach that once you have a proper understanding of a situation, that automatically develops a feeling. That's a lot of how advertising works. The more we sold into a product, the more we do or don't like that particular product. So the Torah is saying that the person that was convinced should actually is forbidden from loving the person that convinced him to serve the idol. Yeah. As the Torah says, do not be attracted to him. And it says with regarding an enemy, you must surely, the Gemara asks, what do you mean? We see even if your enemy needs help, then you should help him. So maybe over here, we should have pity on the basis. Excuse me for just a moment. I'm back. Okay. So we say that the person that was convinced to serve an idol should not love the person that was convincing him. And the Rambam asks, maybe he should help him out. He should have pity on him. And we see the Torah makes an exception in this case. And the Torah says, do not listen to him. Do not have pity on him. Again, the Rambam asks, since the Torah says, do not stand idly over your brother's blood, the question arises, perhaps you should not stand idly over Basis's blood. Maybe you should try to avoid him from prevent him from receiving the death penalty. Again, the Torah teaches, do not let your eyes pity him. The Musas is forbidden to advance any argument on his behalf, as the verse continues, do not show him any compassion. If he knows incriminating evidence, he is not permitted to remain silent, as the verse continues, do not try to cover up for him. What is the verse which serves as a warning against the common person proselytizing as a basis? As the Torah says, in other words, we know it's not allowed, but we have a principle that any time a person is punished, he needs to actually be warned of such. So the Rambam says the source for that would be, and all Israel will hear and they will become afraid and they will not continue to do such evil things. Okay, so let me just sum up where we're at. So the Rambam has just basically said that no pity should be granted towards a basis. Again, this is an exception. When it comes to any other person deserving of the death penalty, then we try to get him out of it, but we don't in this case. And I guess over here it would be appropriate to mention the known saying that if you are going to be merciful towards the cruel, you'll end up being cruel towards the merciful. If you see somebody as an abuser and you feel bad for him, then you're obviously being cruel to the person that is being abused. And this really is the worst of sins, even worse than murder. I mean, when we think about the 10 commandments, it's the first 2 commandments to believe in God and not to believe in any other God. It's specified separately, but this is really the worst of the worst. Everything about us as the Jewish people is to reveal God in the world and to make this world a godly place. And this person is doing precisely the opposite. The Torah says he needs to be dealt with in the harshest of ways. Okay, here's an interesting phenomena where the guy is not just telling, the convincer is not just telling the person being convinced to serve an idol, but the convincer is saying, I am the idol, serve me. So should he tell them worship me and they worship him, then he would be stoned for convincing them to serve an idol, which is him himself. However, if they did not worship him, even if they accepted and agreed to his statements, he is not liable for stoning. So we said at the beginning of the chapter that if a person convinces somebody to serve an idol, even if the person doesn't go ahead and serve the idol, then the convincer has already violated the law. Here we say that the convincer has not violated the law until the person being convinced acts on it. So what's the difference? So the commentaries say that since the convincer said, I am the idol, that already sounds absurd. That already sounds absurd to say, look, I have news for you. I am your God. Go ahead and serve me. And therefore, until the person actually serves him, the convincer would not yet be liable. Once, however, the person serves him, has obviously already violation has took place, and the basis, the convincer, would be punished, would be stoned. In contrast, if he proselytizes by telling them to worship another man, another false deity, if they accept his statement and say, we will go and worship, even if they have not actually worshipped, both of them, the basis, the person that convinced them, and the musus, the person that was convinced, would be stoned. As the Torah says, do not be attracted to him or listen to him. Thus, if one was attracted and listened, even if one didn't act yet, but they just listened, then one would be held liable. Okay, we've gone through about the first half of the chapter. I'll watch the time. Hopefully, we will finish on time. So now we move over to another phenomena which connects in a strong way, but is a little different. We're going to speak a lot about prophecy now and false prophecy, and obviously how that could interplay and come and connect with the subject of convincing somebody to serve a false idol. So for the next few halachos, we'll speak about false prophets and false prophecies. And at the very end, we'll speak about to what extent we should go to prevent people from speaking about false gods, which could be very relevant in the common era, an idea of trying to avoid mentioning other gods. It's actually a prohibition, and that will bring us to the end of the chapter. So now let's talk a little bit about prophets, starting with halacha 6. So what is meant by the expression, a prophet who prophesies in the name of false gods? This would be somebody who says, the following false gods or the following star told me that we should do this and this mitzvah, or we should not do such and such. Even if the person was telling the people to do what the Torah says to do. So let's say a person said that the following God told me that we should put on tefillin every day, 6 days a week. So he was telling everybody to do a mitzvah. It doesn't matter. The fact that he said what he said in the name of a false god is already a violation. If a warning was given to him beforehand, so this person would need to be warned, then he is executed not by stoning, which is the worst of punishments, but by strangulation, which is not as serious form of death penalty. As the Torah says, and one who speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet shall die. The warning against this transgression is included in the statement, and you shall not mention the name of other gods. So even though what you were telling the person to do was a good thing, it cannot be said in the name of other gods. Number 7, it is forbidden to enter into a discussion or a debate with one who prophesies in the name of a false god. We may not ask him to perform a sign or a miracle, and even if he does so on his own accord, we should pay no attention to it or think about it at all. Whoever contemplates about the wonders being performed by a false prophet, saying, maybe they're true, maybe he has a point. With that itself, the person has violated a negative command, as the Torah says, do not listen to the words of such a prophet, meaning that even if the way what he's doing is, it looks like he's performing miracles, if we know that his reputation is bad and what he's telling people to do is wrong, then regardless of what miracles he performs, it would be forbidden to even listen to him or to pay any attention to what he's doing at all. Similarly, a false prophet should be executed by strangulation. He is to be executed, although he speaks in the name of Hashem, and neither adds nor diminishes from the Torah. Since he's a false prophet, he has to be removed, as the Torah says, however, the prophet who dares to speak a matter in my name, which I do not command, that prophet shall die. Okay. So there's two types of false prophets. Category number one is a false prophet who prophesies regarding something that was never heard through prophetic vision. So if a person says that, I prophesize that next week everybody should shout out 3 times, whatever it was. If he said a false prophecy that he never heard, that's one type of a false prophet. And the second is, even if it was something that was a prophecy, but it had been given to somebody else and he said it in his own name. Very common when you hear something really good and then you make it your own. You convince people that this is your thing, it's not somebody else's. So here's somebody that knows that there was a prophecy, but instead of saying that this is something that Elijah the prophet said, he says, actually, God came to me and I received the prophecy myself. Then that is also considered, he's also considered a false prophet and needs to be executed by strangulation. Okay, here's another violation. Anybody who refrains from executing a false prophet because they say, look, he looks really holy. I feel bad for him to go. So such a person violates a negative command. As the Torah says, do not fear him. Similarly, included within the scope of this prohibition, do not fear him, are people who withhold incriminating testimony against the false prophet. If you know someone's a false prophet, the Torah, one of the mitzvahs is that you should not be afraid to come out against him. If you have any evidence against him, you must come forward. A false prophet may be tried only by the Supreme Court of 21 judges. Generally, the death penalty in the times of the temple would be able to be executed by 23 judges, but a false prophet would need a full Beis Din, the larger size Beis Din of 71 judges in order for him to be convicted. Finally, the last 2 halachas, which speak about not mentioning false prophets, which is quite relevant for all of us. A person who makes a vow or takes an oath, there's a difference between a vow and an oath, but I'll leave that for now because we've run out of time. But a person who does swear in the name of a false deity is liable for lashes. As the Torah says, you should not mention the name of other gods. So if somebody says, I swear to you in the name of, and mentions somebody that is, us Jews should not be mentioning, they're actually violating a biblical command. This applies both to one who takes such an oath for his own reasons and to one who takes such an oath because of a non-Jew. Meaning if the non-Jew comes and says, I want you to swear in the name of my gods, and we know it's a false god, it's not God, it's not the one God, then it is forbidden. It also is forbidden to have a non-Jew take an oath in the name of a false god. This mitzvah of not believing in any god other than Hashem, I keep saying a false god. I'm confusing it with a false prophet. It's not a false god. It's with any god other than God. There is only one God. So just to clarify that. So not only should you not say anything in the name of false gods, but you are not even allowed to cause a Gentile to swear in the name of his gods, because believing in one God is not just a mitzvah for the Jews. It's one of the 7 Noahide laws that apply to all of mankind. It is even forbidden to mention the name of a Gentile deity without any connection to an oath. As the Torah says, you shall not mention it. That's where the expression comes yashka, because since he is connected with the Trinity, with something that Jews are not allowed to believe in, we believe there is only one power in this world. Therefore, we actually avoid mentioning his name altogether. We would just say yashka. Finally, concluding with the last halacha, a person should not tell a colleague, wait for me near a particular false deity or the like. So a person shouldn't say, okay, you want to know where they live? So they live next door the church. That's not okay, because a church is a place that, for Jews, is a place we wouldn't be allowed to enter because they believe in one power other than God. So it is permitted to mention the name of any false deity that is mentioned in the Bible, like Pa'ar, Baal, Devai, Gad, and the like. It is forbidden to cause others to take oaths or vows in the name of false deities. In regard to all of these prohibitions, only the transgressor liable for lashes is one who himself takes a vow and oath in the name of a false god. Meaning earlier we spoke about the prohibition of convincing somebody else. That was to actually serve a god. But if it's just a matter of mentioning a god, then only the person that actually mentions him would be liable, not somebody that was trying to convince him. Thank you for joining us. So let's make sure that we talk only about Hashem and we don't mix any other foreign beliefs into our vocabulary. It's worth mentioning that there are even instances where one is discouraged from going into a partnership where one might have to cause his partner to take oaths, which the partner would want to do in false gods. This is a very serious one. So the next time you say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, here's some more laws on that. One God, meaning that we only are strict to Hashem, and it's the worst of worst to think of going in any other ways. Thank you for joining us and wishing you a wonderful day.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Any questions?
Thanks, Rabbi.